In a previous video, we've created a simple person class and associated some values with its properties, and I called two methods, email link and telephone link, and displayed whatever they've returned in a browser. Okay, in this video, what we're going to do, one thing I wanted to show you is as well, we've created one instance of this object here, and everything is associated with a single instance of the person object. But let's say I want to create another person with completely different values. Let's now do this. So we copy the entire thing. Now, rather than overwriting this person instance, we are going to call it person2, for instance. And I'm going to quickly rename this variable here. There we go. And now we have person2. Let's change this name, say John, surname Doe, and johndoe.com, and let's change this number to 777777, for instance. Okay, and if I want to call these two methods on this new instance, if we just rename this person to person2 and preview everything in a browser, refresh the page, obviously, as you can see, it displays the values which we've associated with the second object instance. But let's quickly put this the new line, so that everything is on the new line. Refresh, there we go. So this is the first object, these two instance, and this is the second object instance. And you can create as many instances as you want using a single class. So we've got this person class, and you can create multiple object with completely different values associated with the properties. Okay, I'm going to remove this second example, and now I promised you that in a previous video that we're going to have a look at this address property. Now, we could obviously associate the string with this property, but what we are going to do is to associate an object, instance of an object, with this property. So what I need to do first is to create a new object. Inside of the src directory, we're going to create a new class called address. No. And what this class will have, it will have several properties. Public number, then public street, public town, public region, public post underscore code, then we have public country. So these are all of the properties we need for our address class. Let's now move to the index.php and instantiate the address object. So we use address variable with the name address and the new address. But what we need to do is to import it first. So right at the top, I'm just going to duplicate this line, and I'm going to use the address now. So address.php from within the source directory. And now with the address, I'm going to associate the number, which will be, say, 10. Then we have address street, which will be, say, London Road. Then we are going to have the address town, say, Brighton. Then we're going to have address region, which would be Sussex. Then we're going to have address postcode, say RH17, whatever, that's gonna be enough. And then the address country, usually we would probably have another object or numerical ID of the country, but for this specific purpose, let's just use the string United Kingdom. There we go. So this is our address. And now if I was to, and let me just create a few new lines. If I was to use this address object now and wanted to display the full address, what I would have to do is something like this: echo address number. Say we're going to concatenate it with comma, then address street, concatenated with comma as well, then address town, concatenating with comma. But as you can see, we are repeating ourselves over and over again. So probably what we could do in this case, you are already familiar with the implode function. Let's quickly use this one, implode. And what we want to use for the to implode all these items together, to join them together, it's a comma. So in between a double or single quotes, put the comma and a space, and then we are going to give it an array of properties of this object. So I'm going to pass address number, address street after comma, then address town, and I'm just going to remove all this. After town we hit region, so let's quickly rename this to region, and then we have postcode, and lastly we have country. There we go. So if I now save it and preview it in the browser, but before I'll do this, let's just comment these two lines. Actually, let's remove this echo statement for the person completely. Save it and preview it in the browser, and there we go. The full address, everything's separated with a comma and a space. So that's all fine. But now look what's going to happen if, for instance, we didn't have the road associated, a street associated with it. So I'm just going to comment this line and preview everything in the browser. Refresh the page, and there we go. You can see two commas, one after the other, which is not quite what you'd like to have, obviously. So let's make it a little bit easier for ourselves and create a method which will take care of this sort of situations. If we go back to the editor, I'm going to put it back in, and let's remove all this. Go back to the address class, and we are going to start with public function full for the address, and then what we want to join it with, because you won't always want commas. Sometimes perhaps you would like to put them on new line, so you can pass in a new line, basically HTML tag as an argument, and so on. So this will allow you to specify what sort of separator for each item you want. So I'm going to call this argument joined, and by default I'm going to set it to comma and a space. Okay, so this is our argument, and now what I'm going to return from here is the implode function, which we've just used. And for the first argument, I'm going to use the joint, which is coming through as an argument, and then I'm going to use another method, this filtered properties. So this method, which does not exist yet, will filter all these properties and will return the array of only the properties which have value associated with them. Okay, so let's create a few new lines here. Let's create this new method, filtered properties, and this one doesn't take any arguments. Let's leave it at public because we didn't discuss visibility yet, encapsulation. As you saw, probably automatically put private here, but we will discuss this very shortly. For the time being, we use in public for everything basically, before we learn about other options. Okay, so we're returning from this one array underscore filter, and we pass in the array as the first argument, and then the second one is going to be a callback, which will take each item of this first array. So I'm going to call it an item. And if it returns true, non-empty from within this callback function, then this item will be returned. Otherwise, it won't. So what we're going to do here is return, and we check isn't exclamation mark empty item. So if it's not empty, it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false, and it won't be returned. So for the array, we simply put all the properties in. So this number, then this street, then this town, then this region, then we have postcode, so this postcode, then we have this country. Let's quickly have a look at this again. So what we're doing within this method, we're using array filter, and we've discussed array filter in the previous season. It basically takes the array as the first argument and the callback function as a second one. Anything callable basically as a second argument. So it may be a method of the class as well. Within this second argument, from within this callback function, we are basically returning true or false. So each of these items will be passed through as an argument to this second argument, to this function, and we will do the check. If it's empty, do not return it basically with this method. Only return the ones that have some value associated with them. In that case, we will only join the ones that have some values and return them joined with whatever join we're passing through as an argument to this full method. So what I'm going to do now is, if we go back to our index.php file, now we're going to echo address, and we use the full method, and let's use default comma as an argument. If we save it, preview it in the browser, refresh the page, and as you can see, the full address is here. But if I now comment street, let's quickly comment this line. If we go back to the browser, refresh the page, you can see it's just completely removed. There is no unnecessary comma after this, because this item was never added to the returned with the array after filtering through all of the properties. So you can comment another one. Let's say postcode we're going to remove. So let's comment it, go back to the browser, refresh it, and everything still looks nice. If we want to change it, if we want to use, let's say, BR tag to put it all on new lines, if we refresh the page, there we go. You can see a single method to deal with this, then the other method to just filter all the options, and that handles basically all the problems with this sort of situations when we may not have some value for a given field or property of the object. Okay, so this is the new address. Now, how do we make this address the address of this person? Well, it's very simple actually. I'm going to remove this echo statement here. Now we're going to use person and then associate this address with the property address of this person. So this person address equals address. So what we can do now, we can echo person, then access address property, and on this property, because it's an object, it's an instance of this address class, we can call full. And it's going to return exactly same thing. As you can see, apart from the fact that obviously we're using comma again, but it returned the entire address the same way as if we were calling this on the address directly. Now, because this address instance is associated with the property of the person, we can call it on this property. So person, address, and then a full method on this instance of the address object, being a property of the person. Now, this looks fine, but we can improve this a little bit further. So we've got this association, which is good, but perhaps you don't always want to call the address property and then the method. Perhaps you would like to just call person full address. And we can do it as well, obviously, because now that we have something associated, we have this address object associated with the property of the person, we can simply create a new method. And let's call it full address. So public function full address. And here we are simply going to delegate this call, which we've just made from within the index.php, to the address property and then the method full. So what we're going to do is return this address. We're using, again, pseudo variable this to refer to our internal property, address, and then call full method on this object. Now my IDE highlights it automatically because it doesn't know that this address is actually the instance of the object. There are ways to tell our IDEs what type of the value is associated with the given property, and we will discuss this in a following video, but for now we're just going to keep it this way. If we save it, now go back to the index.php, rather than having this address full, we're just going to call full address. Sorry, it's not name, it's address. There we go. And if we go back, same thing as you can see. And we can now, from within the person, we can format it as well, whichever way we want. Let's say, let's put again, new line character. Save it, go back, refresh, and the full address, each line is on its own line. If we go back, but as you can see from within the index, we only called full address, but person class decides how we want it formatted. So that's it in this video. In the following one, we'll have a look at the doc blocks.